Hello everyone, I hope this video finds you in good health and good spirits and everything is going well. Getting ready for Shabbos, or perhaps after Shabbos and you had a good Shabbos. I just wanted to share a short thought about this week's Pirkei Avos. This is the third parak that we are studying this week, the third chapter of Ethics of Our Fathers. And I'd just like to share a quick thought on one of the Mishnayos in this week's chapter. And that is the 8th Mishnah, Mishnah Ches, that reads as follows. Rabbi Elazar ish bar Tosa emer, Rabbi Elazar, a man of bar Tosa, said, Ten loy mishaloi, give him of his own, sha'ata v'shalacha shaloi, for you and that which is yours are his. Here referring to Hashem, saying that we should give to Hashem that which is his because everything that we have is his. So the simple understanding of this Mishnah is that we need to recognize that when Hashem gives us things, they are not necessarily just for us to hold on to. They're not necessarily for us just to use for ourselves, but we should give them back, so to speak. We should use them in the service of Hashem. So what this means is a very fundamental concept for the generosity of the Jewish people, which is commonplace, and we are well known for it, and it's important that we each take our part seriously in this role. And that is that we oftentimes find ourselves looking to purchase something, and we find a way. We find a way to make it that it's a necessity, perhaps, or we find a way to be able to afford it even though we know it's not a necessity, and we make it work. Somehow or another, we find a way to be able to afford that car that we want, or we find a way to be able to afford that piece of jewelry that we want, or we find a way that it's a necessity for our kids to have this toy or game, and we figure out ways to make it work. And we make sure that we can afford it and that we're being responsible, and we make those purchases in full knowledge that we've convinced ourselves that these things make sense. These are purchases that we should be making, and this is the way to do it. And yet, somehow, when it comes to giving away our money to others, somehow we're not always so inclined to find a way to make it work. We're not always convincing ourselves that this is a need. And we say, well, we can't afford it. And somehow we don't recognize that we're being a little bit hypocritical. And we have a tendency to excuse ourselves and say, well, this is not something I'm in a position to do, this is not something I can afford, but we do that when it comes to giving our money to others. We don't always do that when it comes to spending on ourselves. And we should recognize that that is the Yetzer Hara, that is our evil inclination speaking there. We need to take this Mishnah and make it a reality. The Mishnah is telling us a very simple rule, and that is that the reality of life is that what we have comes from Hashem. And when Hashem blesses someone with an abundance of wealth, that is typically not for them to spend on themselves. It's more than they need for themselves, and the reason Hashem is giving it to them is in order that they should distribute it to others. So imagine if you worked at a wholesale company, and you were supposed to be distributing goods. So let's say it was clothing. So you get hired and the boss says, okay, this is what you need to do. The clothing is going to come in from the following sources, and you need to then get it over to the retailers and sell it to them. And a month later, the boss comes back to check up on you, and he looks at the numbers and he says, what's going on here? Everything's missing. Half of the merchandise is not accounted for. Where'd it go? And you said, oh, what do you mean? You should see what I'm wearing these days. It's top quality. The suit, I wear a new one every day. It looks great, and it's good for business after all. If I'm going to be the distributor, I've got to look good too. I've got to look the part. And I've been putting on new clothing every day. This stuff is really good. And my kids are now really well dressed, and my friends, and everything is really going great. And the owner's going to look at you and say, you're fired. You completely missed the point. The whole point of your job was to take these things from one place and get them to another place, and the only stop in the middle was supposed to be the warehouse. And it's the same thing with us. Hashem gives people wealth. Hashem gives people more than what they need, and usually the reason for that, as our Mishna is telling us, is in order for them to distribute it to others. So if a person goes through life and they spend the vast majority of their wealth on themselves, or they hold on to it without giving it away, then they're no better off than you were in the story. Because the boss is going to come when it's all over and say, hey, all this stuff came into the warehouse in order to be redistributed, not for you to keep it for yourself. So that's an outlook that we need to work on. We need to try our best to be able to look at our finances and say, this is something Hashem has given me, it's more than what I need, and Hashem probably wants me to give this to others in His service. So when we find a way to afford the things that we want, we should keep in mind, we should also be working to find a way to afford the things that Hashem wants. So when it comes time to give donations to the various organizations and institutions and charities, we should think about that. We should think about how we made it work with so many other things in our lives. We should try to make it work for those things as well. Because again, as our Mishna says, give Him of His own, for you and everything that is yours are really His. Now, to take it a step further, this is not only true of money, but this is also true of our time. Very often, it's a very interesting exercise. If you were to write down a list for yourself of the things that are important to you in life, think big. Think about the really important things in life. You think about your health, you think about your family, you think about your finances. These are all things that should come to mind. Then, when you've completed that list, let's say top 5 things, then sit down and take a regular day and go through your day and try to see, what did I spend time on in this day? I spent this amount of time on X, this amount of time on Y, this amount of time on Z, and then try to match up those two lists and see the things that were the most important to me. How much time did I really spend on them in my day? And you might find things to be a very interesting contrast, and the things that are so important to you, somehow you don't spend a lot of time on. But regardless, we do understand that we find time for the things that we really want. There are a lot of people who, they find time to watch that TV show every day, no matter what. And somehow they can't find time to help so-and-so, they can't find time to help a spouse, they can't find time to volunteer, all these other things they can't find time for, but there are certain things that they can find time for themselves. That's a problem, because again, the time that Hashem has given us is also a commodity which we're supposed to be using for others as well. So that doesn't mean to say that we shouldn't be spending any of our money on ourselves. It doesn't mean we shouldn't be spending any of our time on ourselves. Of course not. Hashem wants us to be happy and successful, etc. But we should bear in mind that the same way we can find time for things that we want, we should also be able to find time for things that Hashem wants. Now that is the simple understanding of this Mishnah. And I read once a very powerful story that there was a fellow in near the city of Brisk in Europe, and he was a very, very wealthy individual, and he gave a tremendous amount of money to all of the different organizations, very, very helpful, a big philanthropist, and he was constantly giving away and giving away and giving away, and he was extremely successful in business. One day he lost it all. It all disappeared practically overnight. And someone went to Rav Chaim of Brisk, who was the Rav, and said, how can this happen? This is a person who is obviously doing what Hashem wanted. He's giving away all this wealth to all these different organizations and individuals, and yet Hashem took it all away from him. What's going on? So Rav Chaim said, it's very simple. He passed the test. Now it's time for a new one. Meaning, Hashem had given this individual all of this wealth to test him, to see if he was going to spend it properly, which he did. And now Hashem said, great, you passed your test. Now it's time to move on and grow in a different area of your life. So Hashem took away the test, which included all the money. And now he was going to live the rest of his life working on something else. So we need to recognize that when we are given wealth, when we are given talents, when we are given time, whatever it may be, these are all tests from Hashem for us to prove that we are recognizing the source of those tests, whatever they may be, the finances, the talents, whatever it is, and we're recognizing that they come from Hashem and that He's expecting us to use them for His service. Now, to take this Mishnah one step deeper, quickly, in addition to the simple meaning that we've just learned, there's also something deeper here, and that is that it might be referring to the idea of humility. And humility is not lying to yourself. Humility is not saying, I don't really give so much charity, or I'm not really a beautiful person, or I don't really sing nicely. No, that's not humility, that's lying. That's not what Hashem wants. Hashem wants us to be humble, and that means to recognize that these are not things that we have accomplished on our own, but rather these are gifts that Hashem has given us. So if a person gives a lot of charity, they shouldn't say, no, I don't give a lot of charity. No, they do give a lot of charity, but they recognize that they're no better than anybody else. They're simply a distributor. Hashem has given them a lot of wealth through their successful business ventures, not because of their great acumen and not because of their brilliance in the stock markets. No, it's because Hashem has given it to them, perhaps through those mediums, but Hashem has given it to them just like He could have given it to anybody else, and He can take it away just like He didn't give it to somebody else. So it's not about me, it's not my own accomplishments, it's something that Hashem has given me. And that is true of finance, that is true of any talents, anything about us. These are all things that we need to recognize come from Hashem. So with that, what the Mishnah would mean would be give credit to Hashem for what is His, because everything that you are and everything that you have are from Him. That we need to give credit to Hashem for everything that we have, all of our talents, all of our goodness, everything about us. We should just recognize that this is a gift from Hashem. Every part of it is a gift from Hashem, and we need to not take the credit for ourselves, but recognize that everything comes from Hashem. And with these attributes, hopefully, we will be able to find favor in the eyes of Hashem and in the eyes of our fellow man, and we can improve and grow to be the people that Hashem wanted us to become. Have a wonderful Shabbos.